Nebuchadnezzar is one of the most powerful figures in the ancient Near East.
Nebuchadnezzar, the longest reigning and perhaps greatest king of Babylon, left an indelible mark on history. His conquests were vast, defeating the Egyptians, subjugating the Assyrians, and razing Jerusalem to the ground. Seen almost as a god, Nebuchadnezzar began to believe in his own divinity. But then, an extraordinary event occurred. He encountered a divine force that revealed a hidden truth, a revelation that altered his perception of power. What was this mysterious encounter, and what truth did he learn? Join us as we explore the hidden teachings and uncover what Nebuchadnezzar knew that others did not. Rise of Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, reigning from approximately 605 BC until 562 BC, stands as one of the most formidable and enigmatic figures of the ancient world. His name is etched in history for his military campaigns, grand architectural achievements, and the sheer force of his personality that left an indelible mark on the ancient Near East. As a ruler, Nebuchadnezzar was driven by a relentless ambition to expand his empire, consolidate power, and leave a legacy that would endure through the ages. However, his reign was also characterized by profound arrogance and a sense of invincibility that, according to various historical and biblical narratives, ultimately led to his downfall. Nebuchadnezzar ascended to the throne of Babylon following the death of his father, Nabopolassar, the founder of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. His reign commenced at a time when Babylon was emerging as a dominant force, having already played a crucial role in the fall of the Assyrian Empire. Nebuchadnezzar's early reign was marked by military campaigns aimed at securing and expanding his empire's borders. Among his most famous conquests was the capture and destruction of Jerusalem, a campaign that had far-reaching consequences not only for the kingdom of Judah, but also for the Jewish people as a whole. Invasion of Jerusalem. Nebuchadnezzar's invasion of Jerusalem is well documented in both historical and biblical records. In 597 BC, following a brief siege, Jerusalem fell to the Babylonian forces, and King Jehoiakim of Judah became a vassal to Nebuchadnezzar. However, Jehoiakim's rebellion against Babylonian rule led to another siege in 586 BC, during which the city was captured again, and the first Jewish temple, built by Solomon, was destroyed. This event marked the beginning of the Babylonian exile, a period of profound significance in Jewish history. Nebuchadnezzar's decision to besiege Jerusalem was not merely a military maneuver, but a calculated strategy to exert control over the region. Instead of entirely devastating the city after the first siege, he chose a more strategic approach, installing puppet kings to maintain Babylonian influence over Judah. This tactic allowed Nebuchadnezzar to extend his power without the need for constant military presence, but it also created a climate of discontent and resistance among the subjugated population. The biblical narrative, particularly in the books of 2 Kings, 2 Chronicles, and Jeremiah, paints a vivid picture of the events that transpired during Nebuchadnezzar's campaigns in Judah. According to these accounts, Nebuchadnezzar placed Zedekiah, a young and inexperienced ruler, on the throne of Judah as a puppet king. Zedekiah's reign, however, was fraught with tension and ultimately led to a rebellion against Babylonian rule. Ignoring the warnings of the prophet Jeremiah, who foretold of the dire consequences of defying Nebuchadnezzar, Zedekiah's revolt resulted in the catastrophic siege of Jerusalem. The final siege of Jerusalem in 586 BC was marked by extreme suffering and hardship for the city's inhabitants. As the Babylonian army surrounded the city, a devastating famine set in, weakening the defenders and leading to the eventual capture of the town. Zedekiah was captured while attempting to flee, and his fate was sealed in a gruesome act of retribution. The Babylonians killed his sons before his eyes and then blinded him, ensuring that the last sight he ever saw was the death of his heirs. Zedekiah was then taken in chains to Babylon, where he spent the rest of his life in captivity. The fall of Jerusalem was followed by the systematic destruction of the city, including the burning of Solomon's temple. The temple, a symbol of the Jewish people's covenant with God, was reduced to rubble, and its treasures were carried off to Babylon. This act of desecration was not only a physical blow to the Jewish people, but also a spiritual one, as it signified the breaking of their covenant with God. The exiled Jews, now living in a foreign land, had to grapple with the loss of their sacred center and the challenges of maintaining their faith in a land far from their own. Pride of King Nebuchadnezzar. Not long after the conquest of Jerusalem, King Nebuchadnezzar, ruler of Babylon, issued a decree that a colossal statue, standing a staggering 90 feet tall and made entirely of gold, be erected on the plain of Dura. This immense idol, a monument to his own image, was to be a symbol of his power and divinity. The king commanded that all officials gather to dedicate this statue. The decree was clear. Upon hearing the sound of musical instruments, everyone present was to fall down and worship the golden image. Those who refused would face a grim fate, being cast into a blazing fiery furnace. The grand ceremony began, and as the music played, the crowd bowed in reverence to the golden image. However, in this sea of submission, three figures stood out: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, three Hebrew men who resolutely refused to follow the king's command. Their refusal was not just an act of defiance, but a profound statement of their unwavering faith in their God. This act of rebellion did not go unnoticed. Among the king's advisors were certain Chaldean officials who harbored jealousy and resentment toward the Hebrews. They seized this opportunity to accuse Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego of insubordination, using their refusal to worship the image as a pretext for retribution. When the news of their defiance reached Nebuchadnezzar, his anger knew no bounds. The book of Daniel specifically records the king's furious reaction. He summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to appear before him. Standing in the presence of the enraged king, they were questioned about their refusal to worship the gods of Babylon and the golden image he had set up. The three men, undeterred by the king's wrath, responded with calm resolve. They declared that they had no need to defend themselves against the king's threats. Their faith in their God was unshakable, and they believed that he had the power to deliver them from the fiery furnace. But even if God chose not to save them, they would still refuse to bow down to the king's gods or his statue. Their message to Nebuchadnezzar was clear: "We fear our God more than we fear your furnace. Even if it costs us our lives, we will not abandon our faith." For Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, service to God was of greater importance than preserving their own lives. This display of faith further infuriated Nebuchadnezzar. In his rage, he ordered that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than its usual temperature. The fire was so intense that the soldiers assigned to throw the Hebrews into the furnace were consumed by the flames themselves. But what happened next was nothing short of miraculous. As the three men were cast into the furnace, Nebuchadnezzar observed something astonishing. Instead of seeing them burn, he saw 4 men walking freely within the flames, completely unharmed. The fourth figure, he noted, had the appearance of a divine being, like a son of the gods. The presence of this fourth figure, who many believe was an angel or even a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, was a clear indication of divine intervention. Nebuchadnezzar, witnessing this extraordinary event, was struck with awe. He recognized that the fourth person in the furnace was not just any divine being, but the Son of God himself, implying that a higher power was at work. While Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego might not have been aware of this divine presence, the evidence of God's protection was undeniable. This event served as a powerful testament to God's ability to work wonders even in the most dire circumstances, softening even the hardest of hearts. Despite his earlier arrogance and sense of superiority, Nebuchadnezzar was now confronted with a force far greater than his own. The book of Daniel recounts how the king approached the mouth of the furnace and called out to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ordering them to come out. When they emerged from the flames, it was clear that a miracle had occurred. Not a single hair on their heads was singed. Their clothing was completely intact, and there was not even the slightest smell of smoke on them. This miraculous survival was a powerful testament to the strength of their faith in the one true God. The fire, which had been intended to destroy them, had no power over them. Their unwavering belief in God's protection had triumphed over the king's decree. This event not only demonstrated their steadfast faith, but also showcased the power and majesty of God to those who witnessed it. For Nebuchadnezzar and those who lacked faith, this was a moment of revelation, a clear demonstration of the greatness of God's power. It served as a reminder that God can choose to deliver his followers from trials or to sustain them through them. strengthening their faith in the process. In the aftermath of this miraculous event, Daniel tells us that Nebuchadnezzar, who had once been furious at the Hebrews' defiance, now glorified the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He acknowledged their unwavering loyalty to their God and recognized the divine power that had delivered them from the flames. In response, the king issued a decree that anyone who spoke against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would face severe punishment, even the death penalty. Moreover, he promoted the three men, blessing them with positions of honor in the province of Babylon. The wisdom found in Proverbs 16 emphasizes the importance of committing our actions to the Lord and trusting in His guidance. Even on days when stress and challenges seem overwhelming, surrendering our efforts to God is the most productive choice. Jewish wisdom reminds us that while we may feel confident in the righteousness of our actions, it is God who judges our motives. Nebuchadnezzar witnessed the wonders of the Lord firsthand and acknowledged them, yet he still struggled to fully turn from his ways. As a result, the Lord continued to work in his life, eventually leading him to a deeper understanding of divine truth. Divine revelation. In the year 604 BC, during the second year of King Nebuchadnezzar's reign, the ruler of Babylon encountered a troubling and perplexing situation, one that would challenge the very foundation of his beliefs and the wisdom of his court. This event, recorded in the book of Daniel, chapter 2, marked the first divine encounter between Nebuchadnezzar and the God of Israel, setting the stage for a narrative filled with divine revelation, human arrogance, and the inevitable rise and fall of empires. The king, troubled by a series of unsettling dreams, sought answers that transcended the mere interpretation of dreams. He demanded not only the meaning of his dreams, but insisted that his wise men first reveal the content of the dream itself, a request that was as audacious as it was unprecedented. Nebuchadnezzar's demand was a test of the claimed abilities of his magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and Chaldeans. In Daniel, chapter 2, verse 2, the king's summons to these men initiated a desperate and ultimately futile attempt to provide the answers that only a divine being could supply. The stakes were staggeringly high. Nebuchadnezzar, known for his brutal and unforgiving methods, threatened severe consequences should his wise men fail to meet his demands. The penalty for failure was nothing short of being cut into pieces and having their houses demolished, a stark reminder of the king's ruthless approach to governance. On the other hand, success promises rewards and fame, an incentive that cannot outweigh the impossibility of the task. The wise men, whose duties traditionally involved communicating with the gods, found themselves at a loss. Their inability to fulfill the king's request was a reflection not only of their human limitations, but also of the extraordinary nature of what was being asked. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 10, the Chaldeans openly acknowledged the impossibility of the task, stating that only the gods could reveal such mysteries, and these gods did not dwell among men. Nebuchadnezzar's reaction was swift and predictable. In a fit of rage, he decreed the execution of all the wise men in Babylon, a decree that extended to Daniel and his companions, who were also counted among the king's advisors. This moment is pivotal as it highlights the king's quest for true wisdom, which, whether consciously or not, led him to test the capabilities of those who had served his father before him. Daniel, a young Hebrew captive, whose discretion and wisdom would soon distinguish him from the others. When Arioch, the captain of the king's bodyguard, came to execute the king's orders, Daniel approached him with calm and composure. Daniel's inquiry into the seriousness of the king's decree, as recorded in Daniel chapter 2, verse 14, not only bought him time, but also demonstrated his resourcefulness and faith. He did not panic. Instead, he requested time to seek divine counsel, a move that revealed his character, a man of faith, wisdom, and courage, unshaken even in the face of imminent death. Upon returning home, Daniel consulted with his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Together, they sought mercy from the God of heaven, praying for their lives to be spared along with those of the other wise men of Babylon. This collective prayer is recorded in Daniel chapter 2, verse 17, and underscores the importance of community and shared faith in times of crisis. Their appeal was not merely for personal survival, but was also a recognition of the gravity of the situation and the need for divine intervention. In response to their prayers, the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. This revelation led Daniel to praise the God of heaven, acknowledging his wisdom and might. Whether the vision came through a dream or a spiritual encounter is uncertain, but Daniel's reaction was clear. He recognized the sovereignty and omnipotence of God, who alone could reveal such mysteries. Daniel's prayer of thanksgiving, recorded in Daniel chapter 2, verse 20, is a powerful affirmation of God's authority over time, seasons, and rulers. Daniel acknowledged that wisdom and intelligence come from God, and he expressed deep gratitude for the revelation that had been given to him. This prayer not only highlights Daniel's faith, but also sets the tone for the interpretation that would follow, a divine disclosure that would change the course of history. Armed with divine revelation, Daniel approached Arioch, who had been assigned to carry out the executions, and requested to be brought before the king. Arioch, recognizing the gravity of the situation, immediately took Daniel to Nebuchadnezzar. The eunuch introduced Daniel as a man capable of explaining the dream, a significant moment that set the stage for the dramatic encounter between the young Hebrew prophet and the powerful Babylonian king. Nebuchadnezzar, still skeptical and anxious, questioned whether Daniel could indeed reveal and interpret the dream. Daniel's response, recorded in Daniel chapter 2, verse 27, was a profound declaration of faith. He made it clear that no human wisdom could provide the answers the king sought, but that there was a God in heaven who revealed mysteries. Daniel then proceeded to recount the dream, a narrative that spoke directly to the king's deepest fears about the future, particularly concerning the last days. The dream, as narrated in Daniel chapter 2, verse 31, was a vision of a great statue composed of various materials: a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and feet partly of iron and partly of clay. A stone, not cut by human hands, struck the statue at its feet, causing the entire structure to crumble and turn to dust, which was then blown away by the wind. The stone, however, grew into a great mountain that filled the whole earth. This imagery was not merely symbolic, it was a divine revelation of the future of empires. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 36, Daniel interpreted the dream for Nebuchadnezzar. He explained that the head of gold represented Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire, an empire of immense wealth and power. The subsequent sections of the statue, made of silver, bronze, and iron, represented the successive kingdoms that would follow Babylon: Medo-Persia, Greece under Alexander the Great, and finally Rome. Each material represented not only the temporal nature of these empires, but also the decreasing value and centralization of power as history progressed. The feet and toes, composed of iron mixed with clay, symbolized a divided kingdom, one that would be strong in some aspects but inherently weak due to its lack of cohesion. Daniel's interpretation culminated in the revelation of the stone, symbolic of God's eternal kingdom, which would be established during the time of the final earthly kingdoms. This kingdom, unlike the empires of men, would endure forever, never to be destroyed. In delivering this interpretation, Daniel emphasized the sovereignty of God over history. He made it clear that the rise and fall of empires were not merely the result of human ambition or military might, but were ordained by the Almighty. The stone that became a great mountain represented the ultimate triumph of God's kingdom, a kingdom that would outlast all others and fill the earth with its glory. Daniel concluded his interpretation by affirming the trustworthiness of the dream and its meaning. He assured Nebuchadnezzar that what had been revealed to him was a glimpse into the future, a divine disclosure that demonstrated God's control over the destiny of nations. The dream of Nebuchadnezzar symbolized the succession of kingdoms, starting with Babylon's head of gold and continuing with the lesser kingdoms of Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. The diminishing value of the materials depicted in the statue reflected the declining, centralized power and moral integrity of these empires as they moved further from the divine order established by God. The fulfillment of this prophecy is a matter of historical record. Babylon was indeed followed by the Medo-Persian Empire, which in turn was succeeded by Greece under Alexander the Great, and finally Rome. Each of these empires played a significant role in shaping the course of history, but each also fell, just as Daniel had foretold. The character of each empire was symbolized by the metals in the dream's image. Babylon was gold, representing absolute monarchy and unparalleled wealth. Medo-Persia was silver, symbolizing a monarchy tempered by a strong nobility. Greece was bronze, reflecting a government led by educated and cultured individuals. And Rome was iron, denoting a military democracy that was both strong and unyielding. The mixture of iron and clay in the statue's feet suggested a divided and unstable future, a kingdom that, despite its strength, would be inherently fragile. The duration of these empires also holds significance. Babylon reigned for 66 years, Medo-Persia for 208 years, Greece for 185 years, and Rome for more than 500 years. These time spans illustrate the varying degrees of influence and stability each empire possessed, with Rome's extended duration reflecting its dominance and resilience. Despite the clarity of the interpretation and the divine warning embedded within the dream, Nebuchadnezzar's response was not one of immediate repentance or humility. While he acknowledged the power of Daniel's God, his pride remained unbroken. The king's subsequent actions, as recorded in later chapters of Daniel, reveal a man who, despite receiving divine revelation, continued to struggle with his own arrogance and the temptation of absolute power. Troubling dream. Nebuchadnezzar was a king who achieved unparalleled greatness in his time. He is credited with transforming Babylon into one of the most magnificent cities of the ancient world. The city's glory was epitomized by the Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. According to legend, these gardens were constructed by Nebuchadnezzar to appease his wife, Amytis of Media, who longed for the lush landscapes of her homeland. The gardens were an engineering marvel, with terraces of exotic flora and a sophisticated irrigation system that brought water from the Euphrates River. In addition to the Hanging Gardens, Nebuchadnezzar also constructed a private zoo for his queen's entertainment. These feats of architectural and engineering prowess were not just expressions of his love for his wife, but also a reflection of his immense power and resources. Babylon was a city of unmatched splendor, with massive walls, grand palaces, and towering ziggurats that symbolized the king's authority and the city's dominance. Despite his achievements, Nebuchadnezzar was plagued by a troubling dream that foreshadowed a dramatic turn in his fortunes. The dream, recorded in the book of Daniel, features a grand tree that reached the heavens, visible to all the earth. The dream concluded with a decree that the king's mind would be transformed into that of a beast, and he would live like an animal for 7 periods of time. Nebuchadnezzar, deeply disturbed by this vision, summoned his wise men, magicians, and astrologers to interpret the dream, but none could offer a satisfactory explanation. Finally, he called upon Daniel, known in Babylon by his Chaldean name, Belteshazzar, who had previously demonstrated his God-given ability to interpret dreams. Daniel's interpretation of the dream was as unsettling as the dream itself. He revealed that the majestic tree represented Nebuchadnezzar and his vast empire, which had grown strong and prosperous under his rule. However, the decree to cut down the tree signified that Nebuchadnezzar would be struck down from his throne and subjected to a humiliating transformation. He would be driven from human society, live among the wild animals, eat grass like an ox, and be drenched with the dew of heaven. This period of madness, lasting 7 years, was a divine judgment intended to humble the proud king and demonstrate that the Most High God rules over the kingdoms of men, giving them to whom he will. Daniel, speaking with the authority of a prophet, urged Nebuchadnezzar to repent of his sins and practice righteousness. He warned the king that his pride and arrogance had reached a point where divine intervention was inevitable unless he humbled himself before God. Despite Daniel's warning, Nebuchadnezzar did not heed the call to repentance. A year later, as he walked on the roof of his palace, surveying the grandeur of Babylon, he proudly declared, "Is not this great Babylon that I have built for a royal dwelling by my mighty power and for the honor of my majesty?" His words, filled with pride and self-exaltation, brought about the immediate fulfillment of the prophecy. A voice from heaven announced the removal of his kingdom and the onset of his madness. Nebuchadnezzar was struck with a form of insanity that drove him away from human society. For 7 years he lived like an animal, his hair growing like the feathers of an eagle, and his nails like the claws of a bird. He ate grass like an ox, and his body was drenched with the dew of heaven. This period of madness is known in modern terms as boanthropy, a psychological disorder in which a person believes they are an ox or another type of animal. The historical accuracy of Nebuchadnezzar's madness has been debated among scholars. While some argue that the lack of Babylonian records from 582 BC to 575 BC might indicate a period of turmoil during his reign, others suggest that the biblical account is a symbolic narrative meant to convey a spiritual lesson. Nevertheless, the silence in historical records during these years is intriguing and adds a layer of mystery to the king's story. The cautionary tale. At the end of the prescribed period, Nebuchadnezzar's sanity was restored. The Bible recounts that he lifted his eyes to heaven, acknowledging the sovereignty of the Most High God. He blessed, praised, and honored God, recognizing that his dominion is eternal and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. Nebuchadnezzar's understanding returned, and with it, his kingdom was restored to him, along with even more incredible honor and majesty. This experience profoundly transformed Nebuchadnezzar. The once proud and arrogant king now humbled himself before God, attributing his greatness to divine providence rather than his own power. He became a testimony to the truth that, for those who walk in pride, he is able to be humble. His story serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of hubris and the importance of acknowledging God's sovereignty in all things. Nebuchadnezzar's life is a lesson in the perils of pride and the necessity of humility. His achievements in building Babylon were unparalleled, yet his downfall was equally dramatic. The hanging gardens, the grand palaces, and the towering walls of Babylon stand as testaments to his architectural genius and military prowess. However, his story is also a spiritual allegory that transcends time, offering lessons on the nature of power, pride, and divine judgment. The king's transformation from a proud ruler to a humble servant of God is symbolic of the judgment that awaits those who exalt themselves above the divine. It also prefigures the ultimate judgment of nations, as seen in the prophetic literature of the Bible, where Babylon often represents the world system as opposed to God's kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar's restoration after his period of madness is a foreshadowing of the millennial kingdom, where Christ will reign supreme over all nations, restoring order and justice to the world. Nebuchadnezzar's story is also a testimony to God's mercy and desire to fix rather than destroy. Despite his pride and rebellion, the king was given a chance to repent and acknowledge God's sovereignty. His experience is a vivid illustration of the biblical principle that pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. It underscores the importance of humility and the recognition that all power and authority ultimately come from God. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.